This is Freemasonry in the Bakken podcast, episode 8. On today's show, we're talking about the cardinal virtues of fortitude and justice. This is Nolan Overton.
And I'm Tyler Hall.
And this is Dr. Robert Baer.
The views, opinions, and thoughts shared on the show are that of the individual host or guest and not intended to represent the entire show, other co-hosts, Freemasonry, independent body, or grand jurisdiction as a whole. We try to have as much accurate and correct as possible, but reserve the right to be human and make mistakes. If you feel we have a wrong fact or have a difference of opinion, we encourage you to contact us via our contact page on the website for a mature, friendly discussion on the fact or topic.
This is part 2 of our discussion on cardinal virtues. Last week, on the first part of our show, we had a great discussion about temperance and prudence, and today we're going to move on to fortitude and justice. But before we go any further, I need to make some corrections from our last show. We first, as I said before, we first learned about these 4 cardinal virtues during the entered apprentice degree, and it's the only time that they are ever mentioned. And as Nolan, you brought up, the first time that we see anything about cardinal virtues is during the Hellenistic period of ancient Greece, and you had brought up that it was Plato that was the one that introduced it in the moral laws, and I looked up the dates was 323 BC. And then we see in the 3rd century where the Christian church and other religions then embraced the cardinal virtues. And then where I made the mistake was when they first started to show up in Masonic rituals, and I think I said 1785, and the correct date is 1750. That's when we first see the cardinal virtues, and of course that would be with the Grand Lodge of England where they were first introduced.
No, that's okay. We'll forgive you this time.
Okay.
As a side note, we are looking for a third co-host for the Freemasonry in the Bakken podcast. No.
So there, I stand corrected. I am only human, so a little more history there. But I think where I like to start out, well, before I even introduce the next one, I think I should reintroduce our 4th co-host today, and that is my wonderful wife, Susan, who is, of course, my better half.
Lovely. You forgot the word lovely.
Lovely, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you.
So I think where I'd like to start today would be with the cardinal virtue, fortitude. Tyler, why don't you give us a definition of fortitude?
Fortitude instructs the worthy Freemason to bear the ills of life with becoming resignation, taking up arms against a sea of trouble, but by its intimate connection with a portion of our ceremonies, it teaches the candidate to let no danger shake, no pains dissolve the inviolable fidelity he owes to the trust reposed in him. Or, in the words of the old Prestonian lecture, it is a fence or security against any attack that might be made upon him by force or otherwise, to extort from him any of our royal secrets. And kind of to summarize that, fortitude is basically the moral virtue that ensures firmness in difficulties and constancy in pursuit of good. It strengthens our resolve to resist temptations and overcome obstacles in moral life. It is the virtue of fortitude that conquers fear and even fear of death, trials, and persecution.
Okay. Of the 4 virtues, fortitude is the only one that is not mentioned in the Bible. But what is mentioned in the Bible is courage, and fortitude is courage. So if we think of that, we're not just talking physical courage, we're talking moral courage. What do you think, Nolan?
I agree, and last week we talked how I believe it was prudence was, temperance was self-control. Was it temperance? Yeah, temperance was self-control.
Yep.
Could
Great.
The virtue of fortitude also be, fortitude be self-confidence? That's what I'm trying to spit out.
Yeah.
Could it be, it's It's one thing to be courageous on the battlefield or put yourself out on the line, but it's another thing to be confident within yourself, which I think is a form of courage.
I think
courage actually takes courage to exert fortitude. Because fortitude is standing by your beliefs and not backing down no matter what.
Right. It's standing firm to what you believe in.
Okay.
I'm thinking of moral courage is something, the strength and ability to make a decision and stick with it regardless of how popular that decision is. You know, you stand by what you believe in and you don't allow others to change or sway your
Which is so much
opinion.
easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you're wrong, to still stick with that belief that I believe this is what I believe in, therefore I will hold on to it.
But you said even if you're wrong, I'm going to stick with it. But it also takes courage to admit when you are wrong and make that change.
Yes.
Well, when we're wrong, I mean maybe unpopular.
Okay.
Okay, so...
Okay, that I agree with. Okay. The unpopular votes.
The unpopular vote,
okay.
right.
I see what you're saying there, though. Okay. Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just the endurance, the ability to confront the fear that you have and just, take the intimidation out of it and go with what you believe in.
Well, I think fortitude is something we all aspire for. And I think each of us have to kind of think about where are we when it comes to fortitude and kind of think about a Lanker scale. Here we go. Go back to some education here. A scale from 1 to 10, where 1 being it's not important at all, 5 being kind of neutral, and 10 being it's extremely important. Where does fortitude fall on each of us? Where do we put ourselves on that scale?
I don't know if you can so much say that you can rank yourself on an overall. I think it's per situation. It's one thing to stand up to a complete stranger and say, "No, I'm not going to bend my will." But you go home to your wife and she says, "Do this," and you go, or "Okay, I'll do it." I think it's very situational and what your personal dynamics with the person or group is.
Right.
It's even within Lodge. It's one thing for everyone to agree with the popular vote, but it takes real courage for someone to stand up and say no, especially on a very touchy subject. Whether it's in Lodge or any group, your humans by nature are social creatures. To be social, you must get along with your group. By adhering to the unpopular vote, you risk being an outcast, especially when it's in the peers that matter most. And I think that's where you have the hardest time. It's, to maintain your fortitude.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It does. It depends on the person that you're talking to. And there's and for different reasons. Not necessarily because you don't want to be outnumbered. But like you said, a perfect example is your spouse. The whole purpose is not to upset your spouse. That's not what you want to do. But to stand up to that person and say, but this is really what I think this should happen, or I think this is the way it should be, or whatever. Mm-hmm. It would take I would assume that same way with business partners, with your other Masonic brothers, with anything. It's all going to be a different degree of fortitude that you have to exert in any situation.
And I don't think it's just, the fact of, getting up there and having differences of opinion, because I know in many situations I get up in front of a group and do a little presentation or talk about something, and it's just, all I get is blank stares back. So it's just like, am I catching anybody here?
I get that sometimes too.
Well, and I can see your point too, because I've given presentations where you get those blank stares. And of course, it's human nature to go, okay, did I say something wrong? Is my zipper down? Right. Did I get the wrong room for this presentation? So you start going through all those fears. It's being able to put those fears in check and be confident in yourself and your material, that you can give that presentation, you can stand up, you can do what needs to be done.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
If we look at some examples back in history of fortitude, the first one, I guess, would come up would be George Washington and the Masons who signed the Declaration of Independence. They were a small group, but they were putting their life and personal property online to stand up for what they believed in. We saw it again during World War II with when we were in Lodge this week. One of our Lodge members gave us the Forget-Me-Not pin. And so I looked into that, and I was reminded of how during World War II, when Hitler was prosecuting the Jews, he was also prosecuting the Masons because we sympathized with the Jews. And Masons were also being put in concentration camps, tortured and put to death because of what we believed in. So they came up with this pin because you couldn't symbolize the order with the square and compass. They came up with the Forget-Me-Not flower, right?
Yep.
And which my understanding was actually one of Hitler's favorite flowers.
So it confused him.
So,
Thought you were all
exactly.
supporters.
So the Masons in Germany had to go underground, but as long as they put on this Forget-Me-Not pin, they were able to identify each other. So to me, that shows courage and fortitude to be able to still identify who you are in a situation that was very life-threatening for many.
Well, they found a way to hold firm to their beliefs and their what they wanted to do without bringing harm to themselves.
Right.
Quite smart.
It was
Ingenious.
and I'm sure that we see that every single day in modern times, where a modern day example to me would be taking Christ out of Christmas. I have my own Christian beliefs, and I don't say Happy Holiday. I say Merry Christmas, not to offend anybody, but my religious belief is Christ is my Savior, and He will be a part of my Christmas celebration, regardless of what other people think. I don't ask others to change their opinion, so I ask that others don't ask me to change mine.
Well, and as we talk about standing up for ourselves, this plays right in with what we talked about last week when it came to the temperance, is you have to have an understanding, an even keel, being prudent as well, where you can stand up for your beliefs, but you have to be tolerant of other people's beliefs as well.
Yeah.
So it's a very key, they're all interrelated. You can't have one of these by themselves.
Right.
Because, and we haven't gotten to the discussion yet, but as you're talking about fortitude and the persecution during World War II and the Revolutionary War, one thing that crossed my mind is that Masons are always fighting for justice. And that usually puts us on the fighting end, where it's literally life or death with World War II, Revolutionary War, etc. Civil War. That for everybody trying to say that Masons are trying to take over the world, it's usually us trying to keep the world together and make sure justice is served, and it takes great fortitude to do that. Mm-hmm. And I will talk probably, I'm sure, more when we get to the justice aspect. But
I was going to say, yeah, that just leads
right. But I mean, that's why they're all interrelated. But as we stand up, like you said, you keep Christ in Christmas, but you don't force that on others. That shows the virtue of temperance, in that you're keeping that moderation.
Right.
And prudence, you're keeping yourself from exploding on others, trying to force them to your beliefs. You understand there's a place for everybody in the world,
right?
But you're standing behind your beliefs.
My beliefs.
And as long as somebody doesn't force their beliefs on you, you won't force it on them. You just have to accept that each side has maybe their own unique viewpoint.
Absolutely.
Correct.
So it's kind of interesting as we talk about this, how they all start to interrelate, and one is not a pillar by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that I don't want to get off on a side track here, but it's something that Bob and I both believe in, is that we believe that Jesus is our Savior.
Right.
That's we're
okay.
Catholic, very Christian, but we don't believe that other religions are necessarily wrong, because what we believe is that when God appeared to people, He appeared to them in a form that their culture and their beliefs would understand.
Right.
Not everybody in the world would understand an Arab in robes coming in and saying, "I am the Son of God."
Right.
So that's where I think he gets his ability to use the temperance.
Right.
Because
And it shows great fortitude that you would say that on a worldwide publicized podcast. But that's just it. You're standing behind your beliefs regardless of what others might say.
Well,
Yes.
and every single religion shares these same cardinal virtues in one form or another.
Right.
They all believe in
Prudence, temperance,
absolutely.
fortitude, their form of justice.
Yep.
So, no, I
Be
agree.
good to your fellow men. They all believe in the same thing. Treat others the way you want to treat
The golden rule, yep.
The golden rule, the way you want to be treated. So each major religion embraces these cardinal virtues.
But now, how do you take fortitude into your daily life? Do you wear it as a chip on your shoulder? Do you make sure that anybody who might disagree with you, hears it out? Or how do you envision the average person exemplifying fortitude in their daily life? Let me ask you, because it's one thing to say, I'm going to stand behind my religious beliefs, but you're not asked about your religious beliefs all the day. Sometimes you're asked to use a different, laundry detergent than what you're used to. So at what point, I guess it's hard to formulate that question, is how do you practice fortitude in your daily life, but don't take it to a zealous level?
Oh, I think probably the easiest way is to not get caught up in maybe gossip or something. Because a lot of times you're caught up in gossip because of peer pressure, and the group is talking about something or someone, and you want to you feel pressure to join right in. But if your opinion is different, and you say, well, let's hold on here, maybe that's not the case.
Stand up for people.
Exactly.
Well, and I think that's difficult because I think fortitude on an individualistic or individual situation is easier, but as you get in with other people, like Susan said, you start to lose your individualism, and some people lose that moral aspect.
The group mentality overtakes the individual.
Exactly.
Right,
And then all of a
right.
sudden, you find people who normally would do things law-abiding, doing things that aren't, that's rioting, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that rioting and stealing and breaking things that belong to others is wrong. But
If everybody else is doing it.
right, as we see in Missouri, if everyone else is doing it,
Yep.
you might as people join in.
I've often had a phrase that individual people are intelligent. In groups, they're idiots. And that's kind of the way it pans out sometimes.
Yes.
Depending on the group, not always, obviously, but you can take a absolute brilliant individual, you put them with a group of idiots, and they'll dumb down to the group mentality.
Oh, absolutely.
So Tyler, what's your opinion on everyday use of fortitude?
Well, I know it's just in the everyday of going out to shopping, I have some certain places I don't want to shop, or I don't like a certain certain item just because of
Your personal beliefs.
my personal
Right,
beliefs.
that makes
And
sense.
so
You like dolphin-free tuna.
But that had a little zing. I'm not going to lie to you. Dolphin free doesn't have the same zing.
Yeah.
A little less mercury than I like.
Sorry there. I just had to throw that one in there.
yeah. So, just a matter of, not getting out there and preaching the word on the street. Hey, you shouldn't shop here, blah, blah, blah. But just a matter of,
Your choice.
I'm not going to, I'm a personal ban per se.
Yeah. One thing especially starting about a week and a half ago when we started talking about the Cardinal Virtues, I started examining my own life. And I may have touched on that last week, but especially this week after our discussion is how do they play out in my own prudent, temperance, justice, fortitude, etc. And that's what was the basis of this question. And one of the things that I found was, you should come up with your own moral code of what, whether it's based on, and a lot of people who are religious have a moral code based on their religion. Or their religion tells them what their moral code should be. 10 Commandments, 5 Pillars of Islam, Judaic code, whatever it is. But how many people can recite that? And do you truly put that into practice? Because you look back even to the Knight Templars, the historical, the 1300s, 1200s, they had a knightly code, the chivalric code. They could recite, without a doubt, how they were to act in situations. Those who are very religious can recite their 10 Commandments. But even beyond that, do you have your own personal code that you live by, saying, this is what I believe for this reason, and you stick to it? Do I? Not necessarily. I've been examining, doing some self-examination, trying to, okay, what is my moral code? I'm Christian. I can recite the 10 Commandments with mind-numbing accuracy. But is it just reciting them because of my upbringing, or do I truly integrate, obviously I don't steal, I don't do this, I don't do that.
Right.
But do I hold open the doors open for women? Do I pay things forward? Do I not believing in paying things forward because people should be able to pay things for themselves or not have it to begin with? Where do I stand?
Are you charitable?
Exactly. And where are the lines of charity? Is it's one thing to donate $100 to a food bank, but I'm not going to pay for the person's behind me coffee. I'm not saying that I don't, but defining those things and sticking with those is a form of the fortitude, your moral code, and helps you have that courage. It's like, well, why don't you pay it forward? Because of this, this, or this. Or why did you pay it forward? Because of this, this, and that.
It's like when to do it versus how to do it. Do I only do it at Christmas time, or should I do it all throughout the year?
Exactly. And is it Christmas time that suddenly gets people wondering how charitable they have been? And because you see a lot of donations pick up around the Christmas time.
Right, exactly.
So I'm not saying one way is right or wrong. It's just this has been brought to my consciousness. And I've been thinking a lot about myself, and I think that's one way to help exhibit fortitude. Your courage is to make sure you know where your code of conduct is. And what, Tyler said that perfectly when he said he won't go to certain stores because of his personal beliefs.
Right.
And he knows that.
Right.
If I'm asked, would you go into this kind of store, I might I might get caught off guard because I may not be as consciously aware of what my moral code is.
Right.
Right.
So I think you exemplified that beautifully, Tyler.
Thank you.
Well, and I think you're right that everyone needs to decide what their own moral code is. For instance, like, Tyler's example of a store, I would carry that to a person. I've met a lot of people that I've been introduced to by another person, and that person I just met walks away, and my friend says, oh, well, this, and this. And they tell me what they're thinking, what they think of that person, but I don't like to adopt that person's opinion of anyone. I prefer to
You reserve,
develop my own.
you reserve the right to not like them for your own reasons. No,
Exactly.
I'm kidding.
Exactly. And there are people that I really don't get along with, that I really do not like. But when I meet someone who is a friend of that person, I don't hold that against them. Because the wrongs that they committed to me, or the wrongs that I view as committed against me, they maybe didn't commit against that person. And that's
right.
Everybody is different. So
I've been caught in that situation myself where I've been close friends with people or a person, and a lot of people, well, why are you friends with him? They're this, and that. And I'm going, you don't know that person the way I do.
Right.
There's certain
Right.
situations.
There's something I know that you don't understand,
or a specific perspective, or...
And people act differently in front of different people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, exactly.
So that same person might act differently with you than they do with the other person.
Yep, it goes back to the don't judge them till you've walked in their shoes.
absolutely.
Yes.
And if they're Nike, take off with their shoes. No, I'm kidding. Or whatever the current...
I like
popular-
Adidas.
Or if they're Adidas, take off with their shoes, and then they can't catch you.
The new Michael Jordan stuff.
There you
I
go.
want that.
Do they even make Adidas anymore? I haven't seen them anywhere.
I'm not sure.
Puma. Puma. We need Puma.
Shock top.
The Velcro Puma. Wow. Now that this is the geriatric cast, we will keep moving our conversation on, I think, to justice.
Just before we move on, I've noticed that if we go back to symbols, that these 4 cardinal virtues are symbolized in the Masonic Lodge by women. And I noticed that Fortitude, she is holding a mirror. And the mirror symbolizes the soul. And one thing that I read that I liked is going back to our Halloween show, I went to go see the
Dracula Untold.
Yeah, Dracula Untold, and vampires, when they look in the mirror, there is no reflection because they have no soul. So when she is looking in the mirror, there is a reflection coming back, and I think
she's looking at her soul.
She's looking at her soul. So when we look into a mirror, we are actually looking into our soul. So to have the courage to take a stand on how we believe, to not be pressured by the masses, I think we have to remind ourselves every time we look into a mirror that we will stand fast to what we believe in.
And there's a lot of self-help topics that talk about the mirror in almost the exact same way you're talking about, in that, can you look in a mirror and look yourself in the eye and be comfortable with who you see? And if you can't, then you need to do some re-examination of yourself.
I've always told my wife there's not a mirror I haven't liked. and every time we go down to Christopher and Banks and she's trying on clothes, the women make fun of me because I love that 3-way mirror because I can see a whole bunch of me. I like that. I like the reflections coming back.
Tyler, we need to find a bigger room because his ego is starting to push it. No, I'm kidding. No, that's...
Hey, I got a captive audience when I look in that mirror. I'm like, hey.
I'm popular just 3 times.
Absolutely.
I have me and my 3 friends right here.
Me, myself, and I. I always got 3 friends with me.
See, I only have 1 friend in the bathroom, and it's a hi. But anyway, okay. Let's move this on.
Okay, now let's move on to the last but not least, the cardinal virtue of justice. What do you got for us, Tyler?
Justice. The Freemason who remembers how empathetically he has been charged to preserve an upright position in all his dealings with mankind should never fail to act justly to himself, to his brethren, and to the world. This is the cornerstone on which alone he can expect to erect a superstructure alike honorable to himself and to the fraternity. In iconology, the science pertaining to images, justice is usually represented as a matron, her eyes bandaged, holding in one hand a sword, and in the other a pair of scales at equipoise. But in Freemasonry, the true symbol of justice is illustrated in the first degree, is the feet firmly planted on the ground and the body upright.
Okay, can you give us a layman's summarized version? Yes.
Okay. And to summarize, justice is the moral virtue that consists of the constant and firm will to give their just due to the great architect and neighbor. Justice towards deity is called the virtue of religion. Justice towards men disposes one to respect the rights of each and to establish in human relationships the harmony that promotes equity with regards to the persons for the common good. The just man is distinguished by the habitual fairness of his conduct towards his neighbor.
Okay. I'm going to pass this over to Susan.
Okay.
I believe it was when we first started talking about the four cardinal virtues. She had a strong opinion on this one.
Go ahead, dear.
I'd like her to have her say on this one.
Okay. Well, the thing I noticed was in the first definition that Tyler gave, he talked about the blindfold, and in the Masonic symbol, that blindfold is not there, because she is to represent you doing things with your eyes wide open. And justice for a Mason, according to the Utah definitions and what is that book? The Signs and Symbols.
Mm-hmm.
To a Mason is to strive to do justice from the very beginning. And so justice to a Mason is, they gave the example of not taking what is rightfully not yours and not giving to another what is not rightfully theirs.
So in other words, if you if you're stealing the writings or an idea from someone else, plagiarizing would be a good example of that.
Right. Whereas I think the definition for society and even our legal system, justice is more seen as what you do when someone has already wronged. So justice, they always talk about serving justice. And so when someone is wronged and they are convicted of something or they're accused of doing something, then justice to society and the legal system is punishing that person. That's what I think what they think of as justice. Whereas for a Mason, justice is doing the right thing in the first place and not getting to that point. Now they do also talk about, she still carries the sword. So if you do something wrong,
right, it
punishment
symbolizes balance,
Right.
but also a way to handle if an imbalance happens.
Correct.
So you don't want to fall from that the temperance from the middle line.
Right.
Help out neighbors, but don't get taken advantage of, blah, 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 but
right.
off with their head otherwise, so.
Right. But I think, society sees justice as a reaction instead of an action. And the Masons want to be proactive in their justice,
so
not reactive.
From my understanding, you want to be just.
Right.
Correct.
Not just deal out justice.
Make
Correct,
the right
yes.
decisions from the beginning and not put yourself in a position where you're doing something injustice or illegal or doing something wrong and you knowingly are doing it.
Right.
It's one thing to make a mistake and do something wrong. It's another thing to be doing something wrong and you know you're doing it. For instance, paying two workers two different wages to do the same thing, based on the fact that you like one of the workers more so than the other worker.
Or one is a man, or one is a woman.
Yeah, one is a man, or one. There we go. Right, I knew that was going to. I was trying to stay away from that, guys. Balls are out. But yes, that's an excellent example, and I'll give one that I feel is even closer to home. I've lived in this town now for, wife and I, for 12 years, and we have seen these landlords run up the prices on rent, and I mean people are paying huge rents right now in apartments that they were only worth $500. Now they're paying $1,500 for that same apartment. They didn't change them any.
Based on inaccurate assumptions.
Yes.
Yes.
But
they did it because they could,
right.
not because they should.
Right. The right to do something does not necessarily mean that doing it is right.
Right.
Yes.
Just because you can do it doesn't mean it's morally right to do it.
Okay.
Tyler.
Yeah. Going beyond what's right and wrong. Sometimes there's that gray area where you're into it. But what I think about justice, I really think about fairness. What is fair, to, the situation? What's fair to the equality of what I know? And
okay, so how much of that is based on society, though? Is what's just today the same thing that was just 1,000 years ago in Western Europe or 1,500 years ago in China?
No, I don't think so.
So I think that plays a lot of it too. Is when you're talking about, you also have to take
The situation, the
situational,
environment, the economic.
what we think of justice
status.
based upon democratic Christian beliefs. And for as much as we want to say there's a separation of church and state, our government is largely based on the Christian faith.
Right.
So we live a democratic Christian based justice or system of justice. Europe, same way, from my understanding. But you get out to other parts of the world, you may not understand why they do things. But in the situational awareness, is it just for their society? So I want to make sure you keep that in mind.
Right.
Even if we share all the same cardinal virtues, from Christianity to Islam to Judaism to Buddhism, what they do in a Buddhist society as just isn't maybe the American way.
Right.
Because of how.
Right.
So even if it is fair, their system, their belief in fairness is an entirely cultural difference.
Yes.
So.
And we have no reason or right to judge them for being different from us.
And an example of that would be like years ago, if a man steps in, going out to dinner or out anywhere, he'd take off his hat. And women, they had fashionable hats, and so they were, respected if they left their hat on, whether that be church or dinner or whatever.
Right.
Oh, you know how long it would take that hat off? That thing is practically cemented and stapled to your head.
Well, wasn't it
Dinner'd be over.
Men had to remove their hats and women had to wear hats in church? And that was the if you
The
didn't,
Easter bonnets.
Yep, if you didn't, it was a major social faux pas.
Yeah.
But I also believe in that same topic that I brought up is taking our system of justice, of being just, and like you, and I know we've all talked about this, but trying to go somewhere else and forcibly impose that is us being unjust.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Because we're trying to change their mentality. Not saying we shouldn't at least share if they're open-minded for them to consider, but imposing it upon them is an entirely different avenue of discussion.
Well, and I think that's what's caused a lot of conflict worldwide is when one group of people goes in and tries to take over another group of people and tell them that you're living the wrong way, or
you don't live like we do.
You don't live like we do. I mean, it's just like here in North Dakota. The eastern part of the state lives much differently than we do in the western part of the state. So, you got to take situations on an individual basis before you can go in there and start saying, well, this is the way it has to be done. No, understand the way they're doing it first.
Well, exactly. Like the Middle Eastern tradition of theft is to remove the right hand. But that's their system of justice.
I think maybe we could do that.
And once again, some people have considered it and have approved that for.
That's one I would happen to believe.
No, hon, you would rather tase people versus.
Well, okay, tasing is fun, yeah.
Well, you got to cauterize it somehow. Just got to keep tasing.
See, absolutely. Get the hand off, cauterize the wrist, we're good to go.
So, but I think justice itself is a very tricky one. You can live just, you can shell out justice, but you're always going, be wrong in somebody's eyes.
Right.
You can talk about what it means to be temperate and prudent and have courage. And you want to know what justice is, but it's going to be, I think, that's the trickiest one for everybody.
Right. Well, I think when you live in someone else's culture or you live in a different culture,
exactly,
these morals are different. And a
you
good
have to
example,
abide by them.
yeah, you have to abide by them. You may not agree with them. Yeah, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And
well, exactly, and that goes back to the whole living by your own moral or your own personal code of conduct. Is you have to know what just is, and if you know what just is, you personally have a sense of what justice is, and it should include what society's definition of justice is, if you're living within that society. But it also has to be your own personal form of justice. Well, not form of justice. You have to have your own just opinion of how to live your life,
yes,
within your society, within your fraternity, within your religion.
Yes.
So, all right. Anybody have anything else?
Nope. I think it's a good time to wrap it up.
I agree.
And in the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about these 4 cardinal virtues, and then prior to that, we did the 3 tenets of brotherly love, relief, and truth. And I think in our Masonic life, as we go down the path of enlightenment, that it is our duty to aspire to try to reach all of these, all 7 of them, to be a better Mason, be a better husband, a better friend, a better neighbor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I've always tried to hold dear, and I'm sure this isn't original. I don't know where it came from, but I can't quote the source because I'm sure I've heard it so long ago. But when you go to bed at night, the only person you're held accountable to is yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you're not comfortable with your actions that day, then you need to change something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
and to build on that, one of the things that I do every night, and I encourage all my couples to do, is I always say, what did I do today for the betterment of my marriage? And maybe I had to go one further. What did I do today for the betterment of myself as a Mason? I
like that. I'm gonna incorporate that. So, yeah. All right. I think we will call this one at an end.
And I would like to thank my wonderful wife for joining us and being my good partner over these many years. And I'm sure we'll have her and our other sweeties on here in the future.
And if there's any other women, especially Masonic women out there, and you have an opinion or want to get your point across, and I don't want to make this a hot topic discussionary podcast, but if you have something you want to share,
we would.
This is open to both men and women, so you definitely get a hold of us.
We would love to have your feedback.
Yep.
And maybe get some of you more on the show. I like this.
Yep, so do I. All right.
Don't leave me hanging here, ladies.
We would like to thank this week's sponsor, Lakota Overton, an independent It Works distributor. Have you tried that crazy wrap thing that Titan Tones and Firms? For more information, give Lakota a call at 701-290-9544.
And if you know of any Masonic or appendant body activities coming up in the Bakken area, you can visit our website at www.bakkenmasons.com and click on the trestle board. If you have any comments or suggestions on an episode, you can contact us on our website, our Facebook page at facebook.com/BakkenMasons, Twitter at BakkenMasons.com, email us at contact@BakkenMasons.com, or leave us a voicemail at 701-484-1512. And if you are discussing a show, topic, or podcast with friends online, we encourage the use of the hashtag BakkenMasons.
The time has come for us to say goodbye. So for Brother Nolan, Brother Tyler, and myself, we would like to thank you for listening, and we look forward to you joining us again. We would like to thank my wonderful and lovely wife, Susan, for being a guest on today's show. Next week, we will be discussing the Masonic traditions at Christmas time. Until then, be Masonic proud. And now I leave you with these parting words. What makes a Mason? What makes a Mason, O brother of mine? It isn't the do-gourd, nor is it the sign. It isn't the jewel which hangs on your breast. It isn't the apron in which you are dressed. It isn't the step, nor the token, nor grip, nor the lectures that fluently flow from the lip, nor yet the possession of that mystic word on 5 points of fellowship duly conferred. Though these are essential, desirable, and fine, they don't make a Mason, O brother of mine. That you to your sworn obligation are true, 'tis that, brother mine, makes a Mason of you. Secure in your heart, you must safeguard your trust. With lodge and with brother, be honest and just. Assist the deserving who cry in their need. Be chaste in thought, in your word and deed. Support him who falters, with hope banish fear, and whisper advice in an erring's one ear. Then will the great light on your path brightly shine, and you'll be a Mason, O brother of mine. Your use of life's hours by gauge you must try, the gavel to vice your courage apply. Your walk must be upright, as shown by the plumb, on the level to born when snow traveler come. Your book of your faith be the rule and the guide, the compass your passion shut safely inside. The stone which the architect placed in your care must pass the strict test of his unerring square. Then you will meet with approval divine, and you'll be a Mason, O brother of mine. So mote it be.